Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second Edge AI Career live stream. I'm Luke Perrins from 5V Tech, the dedicated talent partner to the Edge AI Foundation, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. Edge AI is one of the most exciting and fast-moving frontiers in tech, but with that comes a growing challenge, the skills gap. So today, we'll hear from four fantastic panelists, each bringing their own insights on how to overcome this challenge. Here's what we'll cover: the state of the skills gap in Edge AI, the future defining skills you'll want to build, how to upskill strategically, and finally, how to transition and grow within this field. We'll also have time for audience questions, so drop them in the chat as we go. And let's get started by meeting our panelists. So we'll start with John. Tell us a bit more about your background, your company, and your role.
Yeah, hi, Luke. My name is John Marconi, VP of Technology with Embed Systems. I'm based out of Chicago, and we have teams across the world. The largest team is in Chennai, India, and mainly our company's focus is on developing embedded systems as services for other companies. So we typically form teams and help our customers, solve problems that they have with, that their teams are either not able to or don't have the manpower to do it. So our focus is all on embedded, and that's what brings us to Edge AI. We're extremely focused on how do we bring Edge AI to new products, to new designs, to existing designs. How do we bring that expertise to customers who are looking for something new, looking to add new features to their devices? So that's kind of a highlight of what our company is. We've been around for 20 years, and we're a trusted partner to many companies out there.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, John. And I guess with Edge AI meaning quite a lot of different things to even to people within the industry, what personally does Edge AI mean to you?
I think for me, Edge AI means that there's AI running in my house or in my business, and not in the cloud necessarily. We do a lot of work, as I mentioned, on embedded. So our company's focus is more on the edge AI, which is basically running on MCUs and Linux MPUs and things like that. Combining embedded with AI into one product. But yeah, it can mean a variety of different things, like you mentioned.
Excellent. Okay. Maureen, tell us a bit more about you, your background, and your company and role.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maureen Wiley-Clough. I am a content creator and podcaster who focuses on issues that relate to people over the age of 40 and beyond in the workplace and the future of work. So talk a lot about the subject of ageism and intergenerational collaboration and teams in this ever-changing landscape that we have here. And yeah, I've been doing this since 2023, and it's been a blast. I was called a dinosaur at age 37 at my tech company, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm one of the oldest people at this company. How's that possible? And we're all getting older. So how do we evolve and shift and change and make sure that we are not, quote unquote, aging out of the workplace? So started the conversation. It gets late early in my show, and it's been wonderful. I've been able to bring about a lot of experts and career coaches and other peers in the industry and beyond, because this is an issue that reaches, really, frankly, all of us who are lucky enough to age. So yeah, very excited about being here and sharing how people can help up level and reskill and upskill, and so they can continue into their careers and inspire reinvention and moving into new spaces as they wish as well. So thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Maureen. Thanks for joining us. And Raphael, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yes, hello Luke, hello everyone, and thank you very much for having me. So about myself, my background. So I studied theoretical mathematics and physics, spent 1 year in quantitative finance, and then did a second master here at Stanford in computer science. And that's when I decided to switch to the AI industry. It was 2018, one of the big wave of AI where language models start to really get really good. And in 2020, I joined Femtosense. So we are like a end-to-end AI platform in the sense that we build our own NPU, our own AI accelerator for the edge to run inference very efficiently. but we do everything in between. So, kind of you can go from PyTorch and we design the compiler, everything, so you can go and deploy to the hardware pretty easily. And in terms of what I do, I focus on AI model development and software hardware co-design. So, bringing models from state-of-the-art research to deployed embedded production, which comes with its, lots of difficulties. And yeah, I'm excited to share my insights on the industry with all of you today.
Thank you, Raphael. And again, I'll ask you the same question as I asked to John. What does Edge AI mean to you?
Yes, so Edge AI, it's like, AI that's really close to the data and data streams. So for us, for example, at Femtosense, so you can think it starts with hub, in opposition to the cloud. So, if you have a little hub that's close to your data source, that would be considered edge. But for us at Femtosense, we're focused on a subpart of Edge AI, which is embedded AI, that you could also call on-device AI, which means you have the compute just next to the data source. For example, audio, you have the microphone and you're going to process it right next to it on your local home assistant, on your hearing aids, on your headsets, instead of, sending things, to the cloud. So yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot, Raphael. Thanks for joining us. And Hiram, finally, last but not least, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. And thank you all for the invitation. I'm super excited to be here. As my tag says, my name is Hiram Rayo Torres Rodriguez, originally from Mexico and currently working at NXP Semiconductors, part of the AI Competence Center, where, as NXP, we work in developing semiconductors and chips. And recently, it's about enabling smarter applications, but not only smarter applications, but safe and secure applications also in the edge, right? Because we want to make things smart and work for people, multiple use cases, right? So I'm originally an embedded systems engineer that later decided to transition towards the Edge AI space. So I'm quite familiar with the challenges that go there as well. So I'm quite happy to discuss in this regard.
Great, thanks a lot. And tell us, what does Edge AI mean to you?
Yeah, for me, it is all about enabling safe and reliable solutions on small and embedded devices, right? I think it's quite common for these days for people to see these large applications and suddenly say, hey, how can we make this work in a rather constrained scenario where we are also taking care of not of the response time, that it's energy such that things are sustainable and that this can also scale. So I think for me, Edge AI is putting together all the right techniques and mindsets and awesome people together to make this land and ultimately come up with an amazing solution that can address all sorts of different needs.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you to everyone once again for joining. So let's move on to our first section, which is the current state of the skills gap in the industry. So I guess open floor for a discussion here. What do you think are the biggest gaps in Edge AI talent or skills that the industry is currently facing?
Yeah, I think I can start. And it's going to be interesting with Hiram that comes more from embedded system and switch to AI. For me, it's quite the opposite. I had to learn a lot about embedded system. And with respect to that, I think a lot of AI engineers, or, when you study, I'm thinking mostly about graduate students. When you study AI, you don't have a lot of courses that focus on the embedded part. So, you're going to train model, you're going to focus on performance, which of course is important, training pipeline, data set, data technique. But it's pretty rare still to have courses on, the embedded part of it, which is, model compression with techniques like quantization, distillation, and as that closer to the hardware, to embedded system. Again, when you think of quantization, you need to think of, lower bit width representation of your model. You need to think about, what's living on my memory. So the activation, the weights, why sometimes people they focus more on model weights. So there's a whole class of new problems that you need to think of. And still right now, most of this material is in papers, in blog posts. So there's not a streamlined learning pipeline to really go from traditional AI to embedded AI, I feel, at the moment.
if I can comment on the, let's say on the contrast of that view, that I think it's actually quite interesting, is coming as an embedded systems engineer, right? I think, of course, there's all sorts of research and directions that's still happening in the embedded system space, but there are quite some things that are already rather established, right? That you're taught in an electrical engineering course, for instance. And then suddenly we bring AI into the picture, and maybe one question can be, hey, where do I even start, right? Because you hear out there agentic AI, generative AI, object detection, all sorts of applications, right? Just to name a few, of course. I'm probably falling short of how many things there are, right? And at least in my experience, one of the challenges was, how do I even begin with this, right? I think embedded systems people tend to be very, at least in my opinion and experience, bottom to top kind of approach where you really want to understand what's happening. Whereas in AI, maybe you need to kind of tweak that mindset a little bit. So how do you then bridge that gap? I guess it's exactly the thing that we're trying to, I guess, discuss right now and identify, right? So I would say that's one of the things that we see these days as well, and also like education catching up with all this content, right?
Right, and I think to follow on to that, one of the things is there's a lot of companies out there that have been doing embedded devices for a long time, and they want to add AI into the device, and so they don't know where to start, and usually what they do is they go search things online and they can find research papers, they can find Python examples, but how do I actually bring this to my system? I think that there's a big gap with bringing established established AI that's out there that runs on servers with excellent cameras, excellent data sources, bringing that down to tiny devices, and getting it to run at all and much less efficiently, and then with sensors that don't provide great data. So I think there's a lot of challenges in all of that need to be addressed.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess all of you sort of alluded to, I guess, the gaps forming because of perhaps the education streams at the moment, and maybe perhaps there not being necessarily as many, fully focused edge AI courses. But I guess, are there any other sort of reasons why you think there is this skills gap currently?
Well, I think if I can comment, I think in the, at least what I see from education, right? Because we're also quite involved with universities because precisely of these reasons, right?
Yeah.
We see a little bit of a race, right? To on the one hand, catch up with the latest developments in generative AI and these topics. And on the other hand, like train your engineers in some other aspects, right? So how do you then combine these two things to create, let's say, an edge AI engineer? I think it's a big task. You have a computer science major that suddenly wants to learn about optimization, and suddenly the question is, well, what is even like system architecture, right? A hardware architecture. How do I even deal with that? So it's I guess, finding the right abstractions, like identifying what are the right things that I need to bring in for people to learn how to communicate with each other. I guess in that line also, like, communication plays a big role, at least in my experience.
John, Raphael, any thoughts from you two?
I think in one of the issue which also makes the field very exciting is you need to have both wide breadth of knowledge and depth, because it's a very new field, and putting things in production that actually work is very difficult. The research is moving at a very fast pace. But in terms of breadth, especially for edge AI, I think for AI itself, you need to be a good data scientist, know your ML algorithm, your like deep learning algorithm well. Having a good business insight is nice, because you want to build an application that actually serves some markets, but also when you design and tune your model, you want to make sure that they answer to your clients' criteria. Find a good metrics, find a good way to fine tune your model. And then when you get to edge AI, so that would be computer science. For AI itself, you need kind of a good math background because it's a lot of linear algebra. If you want, so not a great, like, you don't need a PhD for any kind to read all of the important papers, but just to be able to read research well, understand that well, implement it. And then when you have Edge AI, you need to add a kind of EE background to that. Understand lower level abstraction, understand like the memory layout of your hardware if you want to do some low level optimization, some kernelization. So here you see that basically you need maybe 3 different area that are itself could be like a master. It requires a lot of work and a lot of curiosity, but it makes it super exciting because it makes you get to learn a lot while you're in this field, and it keeps moving very fast. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to bring up too is we do like end-to-end product development. One thing that's pretty interesting is even like our QA teams and the teams that handle like code commits and things like that. They're having to branch out into all different areas now to do like ML ops, like how do I store like massive amounts of data and version it and store different models, have different trials on things, and keep track of all that. And our QA team even has to learn new skills, like, it's not just about like having a, embedded system with a camera, like is it taking the picture, does it, stay up, but, does it work at different angles and different lighting and, with reflections in the room, like all of these things are, new aspects that, a lot of our engineers like didn't have to consider before, and to get it to work with these models that are trained on specific things, and then go through that iterative process, like it's a brand new set of skills that even the QA team needs.
One other thing I wanted to point out is that, just across the board at companies everywhere is kind of the Wild West right now. Company CEOs and other leaders are expectant that everyone leverage AI tools to do their day-to-day jobs, but there isn't really a roadmap or a guide or a process that people have to follow. So people are kind of all at their own whim, and they are, if they don't use it, they're going to be in trouble. But it's kind of a funny situation where it's like, hey, everybody, use AI, and I'm talking about all different types of AI here, right? But and also by the way, like, tell us how it works for you, like help us figure out what we should do here. So it is incumbent on everybody in every job everywhere to take these different tools and use them to their advantage. But people just really kind of are making their own way, and some people are doing it better than others. So it's really critical at organizations that they take the people who've become sort of power users of these tools, and that they distill the knowledge and pass it down throughout the organization and create sort of best practices there. But right now it's pretty wild out there. It's kind of every man for him or herself, right?
Awesome. Well, thanks for all your inputs there. I guess as well, do you feel like the current skills gap is causing delays in terms of the adoption of Edge AI into various different products? Do you think it is actually having a negative impact on adoption in general, or speed of adoption, I guess?
I think from my perspective, there is definitely like, these companies want to be able to see something up and running pretty fast and get an idea of how it's going to work on their, budget constrained hardware that they're trying to deploy. And a lot of times they're not willing to commit to projects unless they know that it's going to be a success. So we're seeing a lot of like POCs and trials to do things that maybe don't always work out because these solutions can't solve it. But if they had the right team and the right tools and the right skill set to even start, those POCs would go much better. So I think that's one thing we see is just the success of the business is dependent on their knowledge base, which they may not be ready to solve right now.
To follow up a little bit on what John is mentioning, I think when one looks at let's call it the dire needs of this entire domain or business, typically we talk about data and we talk about know-how, right? I think like people that have know-how are, let's say, a big challenge, and hence why we're here, I think. So indeed, also we see it, there's lots of ideas and lots of projects that we can execute, but if there's not the right talent and the right people to execute upon, then it is very hard also to run and test maybe these crazy ideas that not all of them are going to work. Of course, at the end of the day, we're talking about state of the art, right? But it's very hard to run if you don't have, let's say, legs, in which case the people that are pushing you forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think again, in this idea of bringing things to production, it takes a lot of efforts and a lot of, good research, actually. One example for us is at FemtoSense is we worked on a speech enhancement model for hearing aids. So you kind of get, audio input to a mic, and you're going to preserve the speech and remove the noise for enhanced face-to-face communication. And that typically, I think, implementing the research state of the art back then, I think it took about, maybe 2-3 weeks, and then getting to a real demo that's reliable, maybe a few months, and getting to a production model that works. Here is for people who, it's their hearing that's transformed in a continuous manner. So 8 hours per day in any kind of situation. That took like maybe, 1.5 years, 2 years. And so you need a lot of dedication and very good engineering, actually. So the skill gaps, and the skills and research that are specific to edge AI. And I think the skill gap, it makes it harder to find those engineers. And so hopefully that's what's going to change in the coming years, especially as I think edge AI is going to ramp up as a field of focus. You can think maybe large model, cloud model. I mean, still improving very fast, but when they start to plateau, people will think about, and they already think about it a lot, but embedded system, more cost reduction, more power consumption reduction. So the field will grow. It's already growing fast, but it will grow even faster. But yeah, it's challenging. And so typically for hearing aids, AI engineers, they're also, part of the more expensive engineers. And so building a team that can do that can be hard for companies. They need to have the budgets, they need to hire good engineers. And that I think, is definitely slowing down the pace of advancement. And I think that's why all of the people representing different companies here, are doing that to make this field advance faster.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks for all your inputs on our first section. Definitely, I think we're all in agreement. There are certainly challenges with the skills. So now we'll move on to our next section, which is skills that will define the future. So I guess what new tools, platforms, or programming languages are becoming essential for a career in edge AI?
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, there's like the traditional, tools that AI developers use, like Jupyter notebooks and Google Colab and Python scripts and TensorFlow and PyTorch and so those skills, what they're developing with those tools, definitely are usable by the edge AI devices in the end. But there's going from those tools, like what they're producing, like what you might be like learning in your classwork, or finding on the web easily, going from those to getting the models onto devices and implementing the C code or whatever and doing it efficiently. There's definitely a whole variety of tools out there, and I would say like every silicon vendor provides their own set of tools to do some level of optimization, some level of model conversion onto their NPUs or onto their hardware. There's a lot of things that have to get done to optimize those models. So there's a variety of tools. I think there's a lot of fragmentation in that market. So like it's if you move from one chip to another, there's going to be a learning curve, and it's not a straightforward move. You actually have to like almost relearn a new ecosystem. But there are tools out there, and so and we actually make a tool called Model Nova that we're aiming to like make like POCs of some of these models a little bit easier to bring across different hardware platforms. So basically, like, can I just quickly get this up and running on my NXP chip, or on my ST chip or Synaptics chip or whatever it is? Just a way to let the community experiment with things and see it up and running on their hardware pretty quick.
Yeah, to follow up on John's comment again, which I couldn't agree more, right? I think tools are a big part of the job, right? Basically, not only the fact, as he mentions, that every vendor, let's say, has their own tools, right? So of course we can talk about the usual suspects, your PyTorch, your TensorFlow, ONX, and so on and so forth, and vendor specific tools. I mean, if we abstract a little bit above that, right? Because today we could say yeah, probably you should learn PyTorch. Just looking at the statistics of research papers, you could say PyTorch is the way to go. But you really don't know, right? What will happen in a year from now? I mean, if we go back a little bit when ChatGPT was not a thing, and suddenly it exploded, and then the next thing is coming on. Right now, we're talking about agents, and then physical AI, and so on. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit hard to speculate. Okay, this is the right thing that I should learn to get ahead. So if I can comment maybe a little bit more generically, I could say maybe in addition to the baseline tools, which of course you need, maybe a skill can be to be able to move quickly, right? Learn how to learn, let's say. That's also something that we see. I mean, every year we start a new project and suddenly we say, we need to learn everything again. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with what's been said. The market is fragmented in terms of your entry point. For example, for us, we use mostly PyTorch, and we have our internal tool that's going to quantize that and then map it to the hardware. I would say definitely as an AI engineer, PyTorch is because it's so nicely designed and easy to use. You really need to work with that. In embedded space, I've seen quite a lot of TF because PyTorch again doesn't have this yet. And again, yet this nice framework to do really to deploy to embedded system. Well, for TensorFlow, you have a TF Lite that's like more widely used in the industry. So again, if you can learn both languages, that's great. We'll probably talk about how to like projects and things like that later, so we can delve a bit into that. But yeah, an alternative which I think is nice, especially if you're a new grad. You can look at LinkedIn posts of the company you like. Again, if you're a new grad position, and look at the requirements. And they will tell you, is it like a C++ position? Is it like PyTorch? If you're more on the compiler end, they might say, oh, we'd like someone who has, so you have packages to do low-level kernelization, which means you have more fine-grained control of how the hardware is going to do the operation, like load and store from different parts of the memory. And there's like Triton, developed by OpenAI. There's CUDA to program NVIDIA GPUs. So again, I think that would be a great way. Check LinkedIn, check the company you like, check the skills that are in demand. And then again, try to find ways to do mini projects on that and learn the languages.
Great, awesome advice. Thanks all. And well, Hiram, you actually said you probably wouldn't like to answer this question, I guess, in a way. But if you were starting over today, what skills would you start building immediately that maybe you didn't build when you did start your career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a good question and a bit of a tough question, if I to be completely transparent. I guess, as I was saying, right, we don't really know where things are going. For instance, we hear and see some players advocating for things that are not large language models these days, right? You never know whether that's actually going to take off. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So you could argue for, okay, focus on that or focus on this other thing. But things move rather quickly. If I had to start all over, I think I would make sure that you develop, let's say, a solid foundation on the principles of this whole field. Meaning, if you can map, for instance, the end-to-end AI pipeline, meaning data collection, training your model, optimizing your model, and running it on chip. It doesn't mean that you need to be a complete expert in this whole thing, but you need to be familiar and aware of it. And maybe then, by doing small projects, try to make this somewhat iterative, I would say. So do a small project where you do some data collection, so you're familiar with data cleaning, augmentations, and whatever else you can think of. And then go forward as such, right? The small project on quantization, so you're familiar with this. And as you can kind of identify what are the things that you like the most, to be completely honest, then dive into those. Because this is so huge that there's no clear way of saying, yeah, focus on this. This is the way to go. It's more about identifying what is out there and what are the things that, I guess, to you can also make you fulfilled, I guess, and that at the same time bring value to companies and users and customers, right? I guess that's what I would suggest someone that says, I want to learn about this and get into it. So yeah, learn this thing and iterate and have fun with it.
John, Raphael?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I guess I kind of like liken it to if you're going to get a degree in computer science, and they give you like a survey of a whole bunch of different things. You might do an embedded class and algorithms and things like that. But eventually, you build up a skill set. You have like the base knowledge across all these different areas. And AI similarly has a lot of different areas that, like what are the models built from? How do you do the training? How do you move it to embedded devices? How do you like test for the accuracy of the model? How do you test for the accuracy, based on like what the environment is, things like that. So I think all of those skills are things that computer science courses or something more tailored to AI can help teach people and get the broad overview of how it works. And then they can focus on areas that they're more interested in once they have that overview.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, so definitely what I think is useful to learn depends on where you come from. For example, if you come more from a system, like embedded system background, and you want to learn more the AI part, again, I think for the math parts, it's good to like maybe take a linear algebra class at least. And for the pure AI, again, if you're in college, you can take some classes that are specified for that. Online, you do have some resources. Back then there was like on Coursera, deep learning introduction class, really starting from scratch for Andrew Ng, I think it's pronounced. Professor. Yeah, Professor at Stanford, and that's really, it really starts from scratch, and the math are actually very, relatively simple. It's just like derivation, so high school math. Then it's better to do more advanced one to get into more advanced papers, but you can really start from scratch. I wouldn't have the equivalent for embedded system, but I think online there should definitely be some resources on how do you deploy models, whether the ML or not, to Raspberry Pi, Arduino platform, and again, that would be the way to complete the skill set that's lacking for this very wide breadth field.
Great, thanks for all your insights. And I guess with Edge AI being such a frontier in the tech space, what sort of markets and industries do you see it being applicable in the future?
I mean, from my point of view, it's basically going to be in every market. You can think of like agriculture and retail. Every device in your smart home is going to have some AI sensing built into it. Medical is adopting it heavily. Manufacturing. I mean, you just see that it's Edge AI is basically being used all over the place at this point, and it's only growing. And I think it's just going to become more and more widespread as the use cases, the knowledge gets spread throughout the community. Some examples of how to do these things get spread out. A lot of companies are going to adopt it, and I think it's going to affect every industry that is out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So for us, we're a hardware provider. So by design, it's an economy that needs scale. And the targets, is really to be in any kind of devices. Again, AI itself, can deal with any kind of data. So audio, text, voice, images, camera stream, and it's really good at processing all of those kind of data. So any projects that are related to those. And the reason why Edge AI is likely, to be pervasive, to go in all of those industry. For me, there's kind of a parallel where, like, for traditional computes, you wouldn't think of offloading all of the compute to the cloud. For example, you have your laptop. You wouldn't think that, you send all of the data and then everything is processed there. It's kind of the same for Edge AI, where you have consideration of privacy. A lot of time, you have camera in your home, or even you talk to your AI assistant. You kind of want that to stay local, have ownership on your data, and not, that be on the cloud with, potentially like privacy risks. There's some question of latency. So for us, that's a real thing in the hearing aid industry. You need low latency, so you cannot offload things. You have issues of costs. Keeping a cloud infrastructure is costly. The GPUs, they're like very large. They're also more costly. So when you compress model more, just like the area of the chip is much smaller, so it costs less. You have better user experience, and you can really think for that for any device. And a lot of industry leaders, for example, Qualcomm, they published a nice white paper on first starting with a hybrid, because right now you couldn't have ChatGPT level of a language model on device, but you would have probably in the next year to come like a hybrid where you would have a part of the compute that's done locally for like small tasks, where the smaller model, they know they can perform well, and then it will offload to the cloud as soon as it detects that, okay, this query is much more complicated, so I need this larger model. So again, first, right now we're like cloud heavy world. Is definitely going into a hybrid in the coming years with more purely embedded models being deployed. And I think it's going to keep pushing more and more to the edge. So that's why I think it's a very promising field to be in.
Awesome, great. And I guess in terms of, we've spoken a lot about the skills gap and the different skills that people need to pick up. So I guess in terms of like actually actionable sort of advice in upskilling and how to enter the industry, I think that's a really important topic to cover next. So we've spoken quite a lot about technical skills and resources, but Maureen, I think from more of a high level and perhaps soft skills perspective, what would you say is important to consider when you are looking to upskill and maybe enter an industry that perhaps you don't have too much experience in to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have spoken a lot about taking on the mindset of the continual learner, and that's critical here, right? And I think when you're looking to move into something new and to gain skills in some new arena, which frankly we're all going to have to do because the speed of change here is just insane. Like it's hard to even imagine a couple of years back not having access to so many of these tools. I think recognizing that we have to continually be looking for insights and learning on the go is really critical, but also leaning into our humanity, right? We need to be trying to make connections with people across our organizations and across the industry, right? If we're trying to get into a new place and join a new company, we need to be working on our networking skills. We need to be tapping into the people that we know. We need to be broadening our horizons. And I think often that gets lost in the mix here, because when we talk about people getting into these organizations, we're often talking about these hard skills, right? But we're not talking about how important it is to actually make those human connections and to put your best foot forward. So I think a lot of what I want to emphasize here is the criticality of actually developing more of the soft skills, right? Learning how to talk about your experience, learning how to talk about your goals, right? Learning how to talk about how you will add to an organization. Even if you haven't done anything in that particular industry, there is still stuff that you have done either in life or in school or across your career that is applicable and that can bring value to a new organization. So I think we have to get really, really a little bit more curious about how we can put that forward with people and start to draw more of a narrative, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to get hired somewhere or get a promotion, it's going to be a person making that decision. It's not going to be, as far as I can tell at this point, a robot making the decision. So we are going to need to have that ability to connect. So I think it's really, really, really important that people start to look at that. And I think that can be really hard for people. I think sometimes people think, well, I just checked all these boxes. Why didn't I get this job? And the reality is, you need to go into an interview. You need to make a connection with that person. You need to actually get the interview, by the way, which is really difficult. I don't know if you guys have heard, it's a really tough job market out there, right? So it's something that actually for mid-career professionals is a boon. You've been around the block. You know a lot of people across the course of your career. It's actually an asset to you, more than I think people really recognize, because there's a lot of conversation around ageism and not getting an at-bat at various companies. But the reality is you do have that leg up over younger professionals, in that you know so many people. And actually, my heart goes out to young people today who are trying to build a career and don't have those connections. It's really actually quite heartbreaking with all they have, all they're up against right now. Of course, I equally have empathy for those who are older and are struggling to find an in and getting overlooked, because that is absolutely happening. There's absolutely no question. But when it comes down to it, being able to show that you have the emotional intelligence, that you are able to collaborate amongst teams, especially teams that are intergenerational, which is really critical as well. Showcasing how you work in a team, how you show up as a leader, all of that is really important, because people are still driving these decisions. It's not just being made by tools or a checklist of people, getting through certain things. Now, all that is to say, it is important, of course, that you showcase all of that and you figure out a really appropriate narrative. And so what I tell people who are looking to change and upskill and be relevant and stay in this game, which should be, frankly, everyone, is that along the course of your career, you should be building up these stories and these narratives. And I call it the praise pile. Like if you get something done that's awesome, you need to actually take note of it, categorize it, get it somewhere that's accessible, because the next time you're going in for an interview, or you're pitching to your boss a new role, or you're looking for a promotion or what have you, you want to be able to call upon that data of, oh, well, we accomplished this at this time. Because so often we forget what we actually have done. And when you need it most, you're like, oh, I don't have that at the ready. But yeah, I think leaning into your humanity, developing that narrative, showcasing your curiosity, and then really just connecting with people, whether that be people from honestly, anywhere in your world. I had a friend who was looking for work for quite some time and wasn't able to get anywhere. And it was literally the wife of the little league coach for his child that got him his connection. So that's like, we don't tend to think of our networks broadly enough, but we're all humans. We're all trying to help one another out, and we need to really expand our minds when it comes to that. So yeah, all of that I think is not discussed enough, and I think is a really critical piece of this.
Yeah, 100%. I think the soft skills are really sometimes overlooked when it comes to these sorts of things, and especially the network, as you mentioned. Yeah, guys, do any of you have any sort of thoughts on the soft skill side of things?
I couldn't agree more, especially because of how complex things are these days, right? I mean, right now we're kind of talking about this pipeline, right? I don't want to go into the full technical stuff, but there's so many people building solutions and things, right? So it is only natural to think that first and foremost, you need to work as a team, and you need to engage with people, and then you need to understand each other. What does that person cares about? What kind of worries does that person have, and how can you best align interests such that it's a win-win, right? That makes good business for everyone, let's say. So in that line of reasoning, I could even say, well, communication gets you there, and from there onwards, of course, you need to be able to deliver. But if you cannot understand each other, then it's a hard stop. So I fully agree. Yeah.
Yeah, on the soft skills and communication, kind of related to what we discussed about, AI being at the intersection of so many fields. For example, for me as AI engineers, I have to interact with the firmware team when we deploy things to test, to check for some bugs. I need to interface with the DevOps team, because you need good DevOps, for your infrastructure. Of course, within the AI team, on the training, on the research. Business team, again, focusing on what application do we build, like if we build it that way, does it make sense? Communicating with clients, communicating with hardware when we have some, architecture, design decision to make. So really, you communicate with, so for us, it's a startup, so it's easier to communicate with everyone. But even in large company, you'll have to do the interface with people who are, much more experts than you are in their own field. And so, yeah, for that first, it's always good to be like have a nice interaction, because then people will go to you and because it's also for them to spend time to explain some parts, what they're doing, and create this nice interface. And understand them well. Be sure that there's no points that are actually misunderstood, like dig deep when it's needed. So yeah, here like soft skills is like paramount, is super important.
John, do you have anything to add on there?
I mean, one thing I'd also say is, just as I don't know if this is considered a soft skill, but kind of just get involved in various communities and projects that are going on. I think like, we're all members of Edge AI Foundation, right? And even just networking across this organization, even with, technologies that you're not necessarily interested in, today, you learn so much valuable, interesting things, the way the world is changing, what people are trying to do, like innovative hardware and software solutions that you didn't know existed. And I think that networking and kind of like forming those connections across the industry is actually very valuable to, where that'll help take you in the future, as an employee.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Raphael and Hiram, actually, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about, your own personal journeys, and you've alluded to them a little bit at the start of the live stream. So I guess, from your own personal perspectives and the journeys that you've had, what did you utilize personally to upskill, and get to the places you're at now?
Yeah, I can start. So yeah, for me, I started in quantitative finance. So a lot of like applied maths, applied statistics. I did my master, here in computer science after. So that really helped for the transition. Really taking much more AI courses. I think even without doing a master, it's possible, as we mentioned in the past, to do self like learning, especially now in AI. There's so many free resources, great resources online. There's classes from Stanford, again, completely free, from Carnegie Mellon, that are like lower level, because we talk about Edge AI on like architecture, completely free on YouTube. You have the slides, sometimes you even have the exercise sets. So again, I know it's a lot of time, especially for people who are already working full time, but that, yeah, there's big opportunities to learn, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess in my experience, I mean, coming from embedded systems, I did my master's in embedded systems, and suddenly there was an AI boom, and I thought like, oh, I need to get into this, right? I mean, it's super interesting, but it was a little bit hard, right? Because there's so many things popping up, and as you say, you are starting maybe a job, and that can be quite hard. It just piles on top of each other. I had the opportunity of studying a doctorate, so that helped. But I couldn't agree more. I think especially these days, I mean, of course, having a master's or a doctorate or a PhD can definitely help in this space, but it's definitely not a requirement. There's amazing sources out there by universities that are open sourcing this, by companies like Deep Learning AI, just to give a shout out to Andrew. So all that is amazing, and it's readily available in I would say in a very digestible way, that it's rigorous, yet at the same time allows you to readily put theory into practice. And but of course, I think it's sometimes easy for some people to fall into the pitfall of just thinking of I need to learn this whole thing before I can even put it into practice, and that will take me forever. I think that's not necessarily the case. So it's maybe going into this mindset of an iterative loop of how much do I need to learn to actually get some value of it right away. And that value can be by means of a small project that you can showcase in LinkedIn, in your GitHub, or in other website to build a portfolio. Important to build a portfolio, by the way. And from there onwards, start building on top of it. You see these amazing examples from people in LinkedIn, for instance, that they started with something as nice as just some audio denoising for people that have some auditory issues, to then suddenly having a large system using agents and generative AI and the likes, right? So one could wonder how did those people went about, and well, they started with small things and just built on top of that.
Yeah.
And I think that was also kind of like my experience, but also with the with the studies on top of it. But it's definitely the case that these days you can get very, very far, which is finding out the right resources online.
One point I'd like to add, which I think is very optimistic, is as we discussed, the AI field is very pervasive, very horizontal. It touches any domain, but at the same time, having domain expertise is crucial to get good AI models. For us, we started with hearing aid. If you have a signal processing background, and then on top of that, you add a layer of AI knowledge that you do through online courses, it's incredibly valuable. Same for audio. For example, I don't have any background in telecommunication, but I do think there's huge future application in telecommunication with things like super resolution, audio super resolution, video super resolution. So if you have 1 decade or more of experience in the field, and you know how it works, if you know the stakeholders, like the technology used, and then even if you have a thinner AI knowledge on top of that, but you can make the interface with the AI specialist, then I think your value is amazing. So again, I think there's great opportunity, but there's this bit of extra work to put to have a bit of AI, at least a bit of AI background.
Great, thank you. And John, is there anything from your own personal journey that you'd like to add there as well?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Rafael, hit a key point. Like when our company moves across different industries, it's like you're talking a different language in terms of data, right? So like the things that are important to car manufacturer versus somebody who's building toothbrushes in a factory. Data sets are different. The speed at which you have to process is different. The security and privacy, like all these different considerations are very different. And so like having some of that background, like learning some of that knowledge across industries and technologies to apply it to the AI, which becomes like a little bit more common across all these different industries, but the data on top is crucial. And so having that industry knowledge is amazing. So we find that like as we move that it's almost like you have to relearn a bunch of new technology about the sensors, about the data before you can even start. But once you have it, you can kind of take that and you keep learning and learning as you apply it to new different technologies.
And we've mentioned it's not only about actual academic studies to upskill. There are other resources out there. So where would you sort of advise people watching now to find edge AI resources and tools to help them learn and test their skills?
Yeah, I can start quickly. Typically, and I'm thinking more new grad here, but you have models like you can take one great project, and if you were to see a resume with that, it would be amazing. Start with a model, maybe MLPerf, so you can check they have some vision task, some audio task, keyword spotting, some language task, and they're already kind of they're the benchmark for the industry of smaller model to deploy on battery constrained device. And maybe pick a GitHub repository, train it, maybe do your own tweak to it. If you want to start from scratch, which is even better, but if you don't have time, pick a repository, maybe change the architecture, change the last function, try to tweak some part of it, put that in a GitHub so you can show it. And then if you can try to deploy it, that's amazing. Like putting that on maybe Raspberry Pi, but if you can put it on a NVIDIA Jetson, whatever hardware, use ChatGPT to understand the interface quickly. If you have such a project, honestly, I think it would be super, super strong.
Yeah, maybe something that can motivate people is finding a challenge or a task that kind of speaks to you, right? Like I see some people very motivated by audio, some more by vision. I like vision a lot. For instance, I like to see things, but I like audio quite a bit, and I think that can really trigger that thing in your brain to say, I'm going to push this to be able to show a demo, right? I guess that's also one nice way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say that we checking out the Edge AI Foundation site and the Edge AI Lab site also has some resources to kind of get started, at least to see like what kind of models are out there, what kind of blueprints are companies using to create solutions, which include like what data they're using, what kind of models, what kind of processing, what are their considerations with creating a product. And I know all of that part of the site is growing a lot. And so if anybody is interested in contributing, their own blueprints and ideas to that site, please do so as well, because there's a lot of value in sharing all this information with each other. And the more we do that, I think the more we're all going to benefit.
Great. Well, thanks for everything there, guys, and girls, Maureen. Sorry. But yeah, let's talk about actually transitioning and evolving as a professional in Edge AI. And Maureen, I'll start with you. I guess a lot of people, when they get to the point in their career where they make the change, maybe haven't had an interview in years. Maybe some problems with the confidence around it. It's normal to be nervous. So what sort of advice would you give for experienced professionals who are trying to navigate a change in direction in their career at a later stage?
Yeah, first of all, I would say give yourself some grace. It's normal to be nervous, and everybody is who hasn't done something in a long while. But then start to take stock of all you've done and start to build your confidence based on what you've accomplished, because it's a lot. You've been in the game for a while, so you have a lot of wins to be proud of, right? And start to create a narrative that is really positive about what you've accomplished, but don't just focus on the past. That's what a lot of people do wrong. They'll say, well, I have 20 years of experience in X. That doesn't mean anything. You need to talk about how that is going to deliver future results for the organization that you'll join, right? And so you want to couch it in terms that doesn't just speak to the past. You want to make sure that you're showing that learner's mindset, that curiosity, that continual learning. That's first and foremost absolutely critical. But I would start with going and doing a retrospective, figuring out what wins you can draw from and speak to, and then how to couch it in terms that will be helpful to the organization that you're applying to join in the future. So it's always really critical to relate it to what you will deliver. So make sure you do that. Take stock of the different people that you've worked with in the past. Talk to them about certain things that you've done with them in the past. Start to kind of refresh your memory of all of those things that you can speak to in these interviews, right? Because the technical skills that you have to have, the chops that you have to have, that's a checklist. That's like a prerequisite to actually get the interview. But you're going to have all these soft skills and the ability to communicate what you've done and what you will do in the future with whoever you're talking to. So if you can, find someone who is a career coach. If you don't want to go that route, talk to even a friend, talk to a colleague, a trusted one, if you're going inside your organization, because you might not necessarily want to tell them your plans. But it's really important that people just kind of exercise this muscle. I mean, it goes kind of dormant after decades, possibly in one industry or in a particular organization. And it does get stale. So I recommend people actually, I mean, heck, use ChatGPT and do like mock interview questions and, practice your responses. Do it. Frankly, sometimes it's helpful. Record it. It's cringy. I know it's uncomfortable to watch yourself on screen, but you will start to notice things about you that you can address. So make sure that you are taking those necessary steps. I know it's hard. Everybody's working really hard. Everyone's struggling to balance everything, but these things are going to up-level your ability to actually land these positions. So I would recommend all of that. But really, I think a lot of people who talk to me and a lot of people who listen to my show will focus in on their age in such a negative way. And I really challenge people to reframe that. Yes, ageism exists. There is a significant bias against older and younger, by the way. That's also a thing. Ageism impacts young people as well. Very important and not as discussed as often as it should be. But don't look at it as a negative. Draw strength from the fact that you've been there, done that. I mean, you all spoke about the importance of having institutional knowledge and industry knowledge and being a part of an organization for quite some time or an industry for quite some time. You have the ability to see around corners in ways that people who are less experienced than you cannot. And so the power of bringing more experienced professionals, less experienced professionals together who have disparate experiences and viewpoints and professional accomplishments is how you're going to get the best outcomes. So that's really critical. But yeah, I think it really starts with, frankly, like some kind of inner work here where you stop looking at it in the negative lens. You stop thinking about, oh, this person will not like me because of XYZ attribute that I cannot change. Focus on what you can control and make sure that you are setting yourself up in the eyes of anyone you're looking to reach in an organization as someone who's going to deliver future-facing results that are going to iterate. Because as you've all said across the course of this conversation, things are shifting crazily quickly. And you can't get complacent. You can't get comfortable in today's world. And we might not like it, but it's reality. So stay humble and stay curious. And if you want to talk about early career professionals, I think it's really critical that they reach out and look for actively mentorship. There is not enough mentorship happening out there. By the way, mentorship does go bi-directionally. I have a 28-year-old coach who's phenomenal. I learned so much from him. So it does go between the older and the younger and vice versa. So bi-directional, but Adobe did a study in last year that was saying that 83% of Gen Z was wanting to find a mentor and only 52% of them had one. I thought that was high. I was shocked it was that high. But there is a gap there, and we need to be reaching across the aisle and helping one another out. It's going to uplift everybody. And I know it can be scary to ask someone for help. And, I wouldn't phrase it like, will you be my mentor? That's probably not the best way to do it. But, make those requests, make those asks, do the coffee meetings, show up, come with an interesting insight from something that you've read of the person you're looking to connect with, right? Oh, I saw you did XYZ panel and I love that you said what you said. And, use this sort of connection tactic to actually get them to connect with you. It's really, if you don't ask, you don't get. And the older I get, I realize that it's all about shooting your shot. And so I would encourage young people to demonstrate all the skills and keep learning and all the things that we've talked about throughout the course of this panel interview, but make sure that you are making the request. It's scary. The worst thing that can happen is they'll say no. You'll live. It'll be fine.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And we've actually got quite a lot of comments that we're going to need to move on to. But I guess before we do, any other tips or advice that anyone would like to give? Nope. Yes. No. No. All right. All good. Well, let's move on to the question and answer session then. So we've got quite a few questions that have come in from LinkedIn and YouTube. So I'll just go down or up the list. So to start off with, oh, sorry. There we go. It's on the screen. My apologies. So yeah, John Rizzo. Hi, John. Do you see any forward motion on portability in the edge AI space? When do you think we will get to a write once debug everywhere model? I'll open that to the floor.
That's a great question. I think for a while that there's still going to be fragmentation. I think a lot of companies are investing a lot in their tools and their hardware technology, and there's a lot of fragmentation in the market. I think some tools out there, do attempt to do some things like this, like Edge Impulse is an example where you can pick up a bunch of different hardware and combine it with the data that you're collecting and build a model with that tool. There's other tools out there. I think ARM is trying to do some good things with ExecuTorch and trying to get some of these PyTorch models to go onto devices more easily. But I think it's still going to be quite a bit of time. So I think this this knowledge gap moving from product to product is going to be there for, let's say, at least 5 years. And we'll see what happens after that.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, so Samanath has asked, what are essential skills / certificates that are valuable in the Edge AI space? Any certifications that quite could be valuable to hold? I guess we have covered quite a few of the skills, but yeah, maybe touch back on those just in case they missed the actual start of the show.
Yeah, I would say Coursera certificates, again, different courses. You have some embedded AI specific one. You can check by popularity. There's ratings, so how many people tried it and how many people gave a good review. But again, for me, even more than certificate is more, for yourself to have the fundamentals of knowledge. But I think the best way to show your skills is through projects. And projects is, pick a task that you like, a small model, train it, track performance that makes sense, try to deploy it, and here you have already like a very strong project if you succeed in that.
Yeah,
Excellent.
go
Go ahead, Hiram, if you want to add something there.
No. I just wanted to mention that I fully agree. I mean, certificates and courses are a great starting point, but it's all about how do you then put that into practice, because typically certificates and courses are kind of like on rails sometimes. So it's helping you learn, but then it is by struggle that you learn the most, and that typically goes in products.
Great. And John, is there anything you'd like to add there at all?
No, I mean, I basically agree with what they've said.
Awesome. Okay. And then the next question from Lee Yuan is there any learning or help on integration of Edge AI, especially inside of Edge AI architecture, memory assignment, workloads, function assignment, codes allocation, GPU, and CPU?
Oh, so that for me, I mostly learned through papers. So maybe like, I think the papers were like maybe survey on optimization of transformers and survey on optimization of convolutions. And they will talk about, the AI, like software level optimization, but also the hardware level ones. And so the great things about those survey is they're going to point to a lot of papers, like, sometimes hundreds of those, but then you pick the place, like the thing that you want, and then you learn from that. So transformer typically on like memory, assignment, workloads, balance, you have flash attention, which is really a great paper. Basically, it shows how you can optimize the access of your so it's going to be a bit technical, high memory bandwidth to minimize access, and access actually the bottleneck. So you make the transformer attention layer in the transformer much faster. Same, you have that for convolution. I think if you type a convolution on a systolic array of PE, you probably find reference or how do you tile your computation, split your computation across whether cores or chips, again related to those workload balancing. So again, mostly papers. I don't know if there's a good book for that yet. So yeah, that would be my advice.
There's one course from MIT Songhan Lab fully on these topics. That's
nice.
in a way like a survey of these papers that you mentioned. So I think it's called Efficient AI or Efficient ML. But I mean, it's easy to find it on Google.
Oh, very cool.
Excellent. And then from Killian, how do you approach existing embedded systems that weren't originally designed for Edge AI to assess whether they can support it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's something that, like I was mentioning on the Model Nova, we're trying to solve in a sense, like by letting you see like what the benchmarks are for models across different platforms. But the problem is like if you bring like an off-the-shelf, Arduino or something that wasn't really designed for it initially, you may not have a lot of good examples. I think there are that, now we're starting to see that people are coming up with very interesting ways to use that legacy hardware in new ways and bringing some of these AI models as like proof of concepts. So I think like doing some web searches, probably talking to some of the chip vendors, about what is their experience with AI on these chips, and do they have any suggestions? I think that's a good place to start to find whether your chip can do what you want it to do.
Yeah, I very quick on that. I think definitely check the memory requirements. AI models that tend to be pretty large, and sometimes the memory budget is pretty small on microcontroller. So that would tell you, if it's a go or no go. In some application, again, depends if it's in the constraint of this person's design. But that's kind of what we do at FemtoSense. We bring a new generation of accelerators. So for some tasks, you really need to go with new hardware. Compared to ARM, you can have 10,000x a difference in power consumption. So yeah, again, try to scope the feasibility on your hardware, and then talk to hardware providers if you see that what you want to do cannot be done on the hardware that's available. For a question of latency, you can look at throughput, also back of the envelope throughput Memory is very easy to scope. So that would be the first order approaches that I would recommend.
Great. And another one from John for Maureen. So Maureen, how are you seeing older 40 plus people using / interacting with AI?
Well, they are increasingly doing so, but there still is a gap between the younger generations and the older practitioners that has been identified. And there is definitely a bias against hiring older candidates for roles that are heavy on the AI use, which is a definite problem. There was a study that was done by Generation and Google.org, and they found that the 90% of hiring managers said that they consider candidates under 35, but only 32% would consider candidates over age 60. So that's a significant problem. And there are positive things, though, because there are people who are out there who are over age 40 who are absolute power users of AI and just killing it. And they're self-taught. As we discussed, there's so much education out there. And so what's really important is for older people to understand that there is this bias that is embedded within individuals at organizations all over that has a preference for youth, that believes that older people might not be as technically savvy and what have you. So first and foremost, know that's there. So ensure that you set yourself up for success by proving them wrong, right? Go and take the time with these tools. You need to. Your companies are telling you you must. It's a prerequisite for employment, and it's how you're going to stay relevant and engaged in tomorrow's workforce. So do that first and foremost. And then organizations, when you have a power user who is over age 40, which you definitely do within your organization, give them an opportunity to display and share their skills and their gifts and their talents and their understanding of this tool, paired with their institutional and experience and all the knowledge that they've gained over the course of their careers. That is massive. So just know that this is there. It's a bias that you will face, but you can help yourself out by proactively taking it upon yourself to learn these skills, to demonstrate that you know them by doing these projects, by putting them on your LinkedIn, by talking about them in your interview processes and on your resume or your CV, because that's going to help dispel this notion that older people are not good with technology or not capable of using it. So it's really important that we help ourselves out. We understand that the stereotype exists and that we do all we can to ensure that we don't, play into that, right? So, but yeah, everybody over age 40, everybody of all ages needs to be embracing AI. This is the future, whether you like it or not. This is what's happening. So it's incumbent upon all of us.
Thank you. And Pim van de Ven, you mentioned the well-known suspects of PyTorch and TensorFlow. Would it be able to identify or create a similar golden standard when going one level higher for making models deployable on multiple different devices?
Yeah, I can provide a quick answer. People are working on it now, so it's not available. But I've seen some, neo cloud startups that try to really abstract away. So that's more for cloud right now. But hopefully, as John mentioned, there's examples on the edge side, but who try to abstract away the layer of the hardware. Just like when you are in PyTorch, you say to your to CUDA or like to your device, and you don't really need to understand what's happening on the GPU. So there are those startups or like providers that work on abstracting away the hardware layer, and that will be the case for bespoke like accelerators, whether it's MCU, whether it's like different kind of MPUs. But the backend will need to be strong because the backend will have to be bespoke. It means we'll support like maybe 10 different players that are the most important one. So yeah, not ready yet for what I know, but coming up in the upcoming years.
I think in that technology, compilers are becoming a big thing, right? Because precisely they can support multiple frontends and kind of abstract out of the framework specific things and be single input, multi backend kind of support. It's a bit of the holy grail, but people are very active in this space. And honestly, I think it's so relevant that we need it, and we need it now. So it's going to happen sooner or later.
And then Yasir has asked, there are many different tools that abstract different tasks in the AI deployment pipeline. For example, tools for models optimization and deployment on hardware. In that case, does it make sense to go low and learn the background, or is it sufficient to understand the concepts in general? For example, memory and computations, and master the tools. Does understanding how hardware works always help?
If I can start the comment on this one, I would say for most people, it's probably best to address this in steps. Let's say, having worked with optimization myself, I could say, if you start from the algorithmic point of view and understanding how optimization works and how to best tackle it, that's always a good starting point. Typically, that already gets you, let's say, to a certain percentage of improvements that you can get. Then when you bring the hardware know-how of how the hardware is actually executing things, you can start making some more informed decisions in terms of how do you optimize. And then if you want to push it even a little bit further, that's what people do these days in literature. You can even do software hardware co-design, right? So actually make the hardware adapt as well to the optimization that you're putting in place. Of course, under the assumption that you have such hardware or that you're in the process of designing such a chip that you may later tape out. So I would say generally it helps, but it ultimately really depends on how much performance gains you're chasing. Maybe purely the algorithm already gets you to where you want to be, and so you shouldn't think about it in the most complex setting ever, but rather tackle it in small incremental steps. Otherwise, it can be rather daunting to set these things up.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add on that is, we've definitely seen products or projects that are successful just using kind of like off-the-shelf models that are trained and then just quantized. But we also see that, when you have like a good, AI team that basically knows how to adapt the model into the hardware. So maybe your NPU only supports certain operations. So if you can get it to fit in that NPU a little bit better by adjusting the model, you get a lot more performance.
Mm.
And then we take the model to the embedded side, and if they know how to basically adjust the memory layouts and do things in parallel, they can get more optimization on that side. So it's actually like a collaborative effort between the guys working on the models and the guys integrating the models to get the most out. But it's not always needed in every case. But to get the most, performance and power improvement, definitely there's benefits to hand doing some of the stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a really nice question. One thing I would add is I think it depends what this person or what you want to do and when you want to do it. When, because I think in the coming years, for example, deployment tools pipeline, they're going to be more polished. So the default behavior is going to make it work right away, which is not the case right now. Example for the audio. So audio, you have it might be a bit technical here, but very wide dynamic range. So typically quantization is going to impact a lot your performance. And so you really need to understand what parts can you quantize in low bit width, what parts in higher bit width. So you need kind of fine-grained understanding of quantization, of its effect. Typically, a bit of math here, but any kind of quantity that grow in a logarithmic manner means that you have small information with small change that are important, and then big jumps. The quantization, usually it's linear, so you're going to have loss of performance on some of the end, whether the small parts that have fine-grained change, whether the part that explode. So typically here, right now, the tools, for us at Femtosense, that's what we trying to make, a tool where we have abstracted away all of the complexity for you. But right now on the market, it's not mostly that. So if you want right now to jump in Edge AI, I think it's good to have deeper understanding. Maybe in 3-4 years, you could have higher level and the default behavior will work out for you. But still very interesting. The more you compress, the more you constrained, the more you have to understand fine-grained details.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions, but really appreciate everyone asking them. We'll actually be sending out an exclusive Edge AI career guide to all attendees. So we will endeavor to answer any additional questions within that. So keep an eye out on your inboxes, and you'll get that in the coming weeks. If you could, please do scan the QR code on the screen after the live stream. Help by giving us some feedback and shape the next event. And feel free to follow any of the panelists and follow up with them, follow their journeys, for further advice. And if you were late joining the video, everything will be available on the Edge AI Foundation YouTube page. And don't forget, Edge AI Milan is just around the corner on July 2nd. So if you're eager for more, make sure you get your tickets whilst you still can. Thanks again to everyone that was watching, listening, and of course to the panelists. We'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
good
you.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.